So today's session is entitled, You Have What It Takes to Build a Business in Your NPO. And I initially wrote that heading as a question mark to say, do you have what it takes? And I realized that actually I want to make this a positive statement, that each one of us is capable of building that sort of income generating arm within our nonprofit organization. So I hope that this is going to inspire you today. We are going to look primarily at the sort of mindset and the way of thinking that will assist you in this sort of endeavor. I ask you if you wouldn't mind popping any questions that you have as I'm talking into the chat. This is going to be a time for questions at the end of the session, so I'm not going to stop in between and engage with those. But as you think of something that you'd like to know, that you'd like expanded, or any question like that, please pop that into the chat for us to engage with at the end. So a little bit more about me. I always knew I wanted to run my own business. Even as a child, I would play at business with my dad's briefcase and punch cards. You know, those old-time punch cards. So I love this picture. It's very iconic to me to be the boss with the briefcase. And then early in my career, I started working at CMDS, who provide financial management support to nonprofit organizations. And I discovered my second passion, the nonprofit sector. I believe we are called to help those in need, fight for injustice, and have an impact on our society. But as one person, I can't meet all the needs until I realized that I could use my skills to help the sector to be more sustainable, thereby expanding my impact and helping those in need for far longer. However, so that's CMDS, there we go. I still wanted to run my own business, and so I started MD Business Solutions in 2011. We provided accounting services and financial management to the nonprofit sector and small businesses. But my strength is not in technical accounting details, so we changed the name and transferred the management to a colleague. My superpower is in creating clarity and structure from chaos and confusion, helping teams to distill the core principles from all the noise. So in 2016, I joined with Bruce Wade, who is an entrepreneurial expert and a business coach, to create Entrepreneur and Management Solutions, or EM Solutions. Now, our company combines both my passions, running a business and making a difference to NPOs, by assisting NPOs in developing sustainable income generating businesses. So this is a little bit about EM Solutions and what we do. Our byline is putting the profit into nonprofits, which is a little fun there. And we offer 3 service offerings: business development, business improvement, and operating model assessments. So you can see those 3 on the outside rings. We do this through a 3-step process. We always start with a review what's there, if there's an existing business, review the operating model, or review the environment if you're looking at starting a business from scratch. Then we develop strategy. We work with the organizations to brainstorm, think through, articulate, and document their strategy. And then finally, we help with the implementation through an accompaniment process. So either it is quite intensive or it is as hands-off as is needed by the organization. We provide templates and processes and things like that we have already developed and to fast-track the implementation. And we do this in 6 focus areas, which is the next circle in looking at impact, project structure, etc. And those are the 6 focus areas that we engage with the nonprofit organization. And then finally, when we're looking at the business arm of the NPO, we look at the hexagonal 6 areas. And we like this as a hexagonal there because it's almost like a square peg in a round hole, that we can actually fit a business inside a non-profit organization. And we engage with the people and the product and the profit. So that is a little bit about how we as an organization support the non-profit sector through our business development, where you're starting from scratch, business improvement, or an assessment of your operating model or an element of your operating model. A most common one for that is really looking at the financial function to see if it is operating the way that it should. So that's something that people often ask us for. So as a non-profit organization, typically you will have these sorts of income sources. Grants, where there's a grant agreement, it's for a fixed period of time, hopefully more than a year if you're lucky, where there are some reciprocal relationship. They ask you to meet some objectives, to complete some activities, and they give you the funding for it. Corporate investment often is things like enterprise development or CSI funding, sometimes linked to BEE scorecards and supplier development and so forth. There they are benefiting from giving to the organization through their own corporate governance and their BEE requirements. Then also you get donations, either from individuals or corporates or businesses or anybody like that who just free and clear, here you go, have some money, we want to support you as an organization. Often organizations also run fundraising and events. You do campaigns. There's been a lot of that recently during lockdown. Things like the Back a Buddy campaign and so forth, where people have made an appeal for a particular thing and been supported by the community. Sales, we're actually selling an item or an intellectual property like a workshop or something like that. Asset utilization, so you may want to have a vehicle that you rent out to other people. Often people have a property that they rent out and they utilize that asset for income. And then finally, investment income, dividends from share portfolios or interest just from the bank. So while I'm looking at these, I wonder if you can put in the chat which one of these out of 7 is your majority income source as an organization. Stick the number 1 to 7 in the chat and let's have a look and see where do most people get their income from. I see a couple of 3s, a few 1s. Not much below 3. I think there's been one person, a couple of 4s who talk about fundraising. The bottom end is really our wheelhouse and is doesn't seem to be the majority at the moment. So it's quite interesting to see that the very large dependence on grants and donations. So we have a number of challenges as a sector when it comes to generating income. And while I talk through these, I'm sure that you can relate to some challenges. And maybe you can share with us in the chat some of the challenges you have had and what has had the most impact on your organization in terms of funding. So share some of those stories so that we can understand each other. I've found that the challenges particularly are in line with an uncertain funding environment. You are entirely dependent on the decisions of donors. And the donors may have their own criteria and their own parameters that they are dealing with, as well as their own political situation. Typically, donor funding is part of a global economy where you may be getting international funding that is dependent on government funding of another country in another part of the world. And there is no control over the economy of that particular country and what's available for the donor to then transfer to a South African non-profit organization. We've seen particularly the situation with the COVID and a shift in priority and shift in focus as well. Donors have their own particular interest areas. If you don't fit into the interest area, then you won't stand a chance. But those interest areas also change. There was a big push quite a few years ago. There was a number of years that HIV was the real buzzword. Then it shifted to environment, and now it's also shifted to economic sustainability and sort of food securities and other things. So it's always shifting focus, and you don't have control over that. With government funding, there's strings attached. There is a rigorous process for reporting, for compliance. They tend to be quite strict in how they fund and give specific things. They also tend to have cooling off periods, which to me is completely nonsensical, that you would have a 2 to 3 year project that is now just starting to bear fruit and to have impact and to be really intrinsic in the community that you're working in, and then you have a cooling off period of a year where nothing happens and you have to start that all over again. There is delays in funding and there is corruption. Many of you will know the state of affairs at the Department of Social Development, the National Lottery. There's been a lot in the press, and particularly the NPO groups on Facebook around questions of where is the money? Where is the money that's been promised? So those are the challenges we face with government funding. There's international funding as well. The challenge with international funding is it is not long-term. It might be long, a period of time for you as an organization, but certain countries only fund into South Africa for periods of time. And we've seen this about 15 years ago. A number of particularly Scandinavian countries said, look, you've had a democracy that's, working well for long enough now. Your civil society should be able to pick up the slack. We are entirely, as a country, withdrawing from South Africa in terms of funding. And that's had significant impact on the availability of funds. Again, you're dependent on foreign economies and taxpayer funds. And often there are high funding limits. So in order to access international funds, you need to be an organization of substantial size requesting a significant amount of money. And for many of the small organizations, it's just too far out of reach. I don't think I need to say much about operational costs because I think that's a challenge that most organizations face. Who's going to cover them? How are they going to get the money? The donors typically tend to be very project focused, and if you can't get a lot of your operational costs jammed into that project, then they're not covered by that grant agreement. And so finding a donor who will give to the organization as a whole to fill those gaps and to fund the strategic initiatives it's like the holy grail. And then finally, the challenge of donor pressure. The strings that come attached with donor money. You find that there can be a situation where you have to choose existence over shifting your objective and shifting your purpose. Do you take the donor's money even if it means doing something that is not core to who you are? I have a client that had this exact same example like last year, I think it was, where they were offered or asked to participate in a coalition to get US government funding. And there were certain criteria with the US government funding that went against their value system and their mission statement. However, one of their branch countries, the operations there had no funding. And this funding would ensure that that branch would continue to exist and they can pay the staff and continue to operate. And so they had to weigh up whether they would have to retrench and close that branch office or whether they would deviate from their value system and structure and accept the money that was being offered to them. And it was a significant process of management discussions, board level discussions, establishing what exactly they were prepared to accept and where the line could not be crossed. Ultimately, the contribution to the salaries for that branch office was shrunk and shrunk until it became too minimal to actually sustain the office anyway. So they were able to say with a clear conscience, no thank you to the money, and subsequently have funding from elsewhere. But it's really a hard decision. Do you accept money that is not true to who you are just in order to stay alive? So why do you need to look at alternative income, generated income from business activities? Why now? And I think this is something that, you know, we put it on the agenda every year for the board. Do we look at expanding to our own income generated activities? How do we build into that? What is it we do? But the pressure really is on now because of the changes to the funding environment as a result of the global COVID pandemic. The impact of the pandemic on international resources is just starting to be felt, but it's already significant. A number of clients have expressed to me how they had submitted proposals for a specific amount of money, and then the donor came back to them and said, our pot of money that we were allocating towards this project has been halved by head office because they are diverting funds to emergency COVID activities. And so then the amount of money available for those activities was significantly less. So money is being diverted into those specific emergency activities that is going to have a knock-on effect in our funding. An advantage of income, business activity and business income is the level of control that it gives to an organization. You really are at the mercy of donors for a lot of what you do, despite how marvelous your proposals might be and how well constructed they are in your activities and all the impact you've shown over the period. You don't have the same level of control as you do when you are the one who is running the business. You also are able to access an additional market. So we're fishing in the same pool. We've been fishing in the same pool for all this length of time. But there is a wider spectrum of people, the public, who can want what you have to offer, whatever that particular thing looks like. So expanding your horizons and looking broader and making your pool bigger. The two sort of ways of looking at income generation is to either ensure the sustainability of the organization by having unrestricted income that can be set aside and can be used for strategic initiatives, or merely as a contribution towards the organization's running costs, those dreaded operational costs that nobody will cover. Why don't you cover those yourselves by having control over a business arm that can generate income for you? And finally, it also generates employment. And I know that in this current environment where we see all the time in the news the number of jobs that are being lost, employment is so critical. The sector is one of the biggest sectors, industry sectors, a non-profit sector, with a huge number of volunteers involved. But isn't it great that you would be able to expand your employment opportunities through a business activity? So when we talk about business activities, we are talking about three possible categories and groups. The one is charging for existing activities. And many organizations do this on a large or small scale, where you take your existing workshops that you run for your beneficiaries and you then cost them and sell them to corporates. A lot of the time it is on a sort of ad hoc basis. As people ask for that workshop, then you provide it to them at a fee. But it's not as a really driven activity. So the first one is then looking at what is it that you already have that you can share with the world. The second one is creating a business for the beneficiaries as a means of outworking the organization's objective. So as a byproduct, you do actually make a profit, you do get some income for the organization, but that's not the primary purpose. One of my clients, and I know that one of their staff members is in this webinar with us today, they run a coffee shop where they employ ex-offenders. They, as an organization, work with ex-offenders, and they work with their, when they come out of the prisons, and their skill set and their integration into society. And the biggest factor is jobs and the lack of jobs and being unemployable. So they have a coffee shop, and they employ the offenders, ex-offenders who've come through their process in the coffee shop. And the purpose of the coffee shop is as a byproduct to make some money for the organization, but its primary purpose is to grow, to be able to employ more ex-offenders, to be able to make those ex-offenders employable elsewhere so that they can move on. The business structure is a means of outworking the organization's objective. The third one is where you start a new business to make a profit for the organization. So the primary purpose, the reason it exists, is to make money for the organization. Often people will use this as a way to leverage brand awareness, so that the people are buying from them and seeing what they do as an organization and will volunteer or get involved in some way, that it leads to something else. And so there's a secondary purpose, but the primary purpose is looking at income for the organization. So Carolyn mentioned to you that there is a reactions button at the bottom of the screen there in Zoom. Can you put a thumbs up for anybody who currently operates some kind of income generating activity in your nonprofit? Let's see if anybody is currently operating some kind of. There's a couple there, yeah. There's a handful of people from what I can see in my screen. So some statistics. According to Trialog Knowledge Hub in 2017, their latest survey, 15% of income is self-generated by nonprofit organizations within the sector, which is interesting in itself, but what's for me the most interesting is that they are on that first line of the diagram there, because 44% of nonprofits in that year had an increase in self-generated income. It was the largest area of funding that reported an increase. And that to me is quite interesting, how it is becoming more and more a critical area. So I want to share with you just two success stories here. Walanani, what they do is they're helping people living with HIV and AIDS to help themselves. That's what their byline says on their website. And what they do is they do education, they do awareness support. One of the main areas, though, is income generation for their beneficiaries. So they make paper mache bowls and light fittings and beaded items. They sell the raw materials to the women who come to their centers, and then once they have made the items, they buy back the finished goods. With a markup, they then sell that on. 70% of their sales are international sales, and 70% of their sale income goes to the beneficiaries. Over the years, they have had a significant impact on the women that they have worked with in terms of income generation. Quite a few years ago now, they employed a manager with a corporate marketing background. And he shifted from making stock to stock a shop. So they had a little shop, I think it was in Cork Bay, and they would make so that they could display it in the shop. And he stopped that, and they made to order with a quality control process, and they looked internationally. So he took them all to the trade shows in the States, and they set up their online shop on the website. And now that has translated into 70% of international sales. The other success story is St. Luke's Hospice. They do palliative care. That's their primary function. That's what they are all about. But most people know them from their shops. Their shops are there to bring income to St. Luke's Hospice, to be able to fund a very difficult to fund health service. They have 11 shops, and of their income of, I think it was 2019 according to their financial statements, their income of 37 million, 10 million, that's 27%, was income from their shops. It's a significant contribution towards the running of that organization. The way that I see the key to their success is the visibility that they have in their communities, their location and their marketing. The shops are more well known than their actual care centers, interacting with their beneficiaries before the beneficiaries need their service. So they are engaging. So when it comes to starting a business and having the right mindset, you need to have a slightly different perspective. A lot of success in business is in the way that we think, in how we understand ourselves, and the clarity of vision that drives the business. So there needs to be a commitment. It can't be as and when we feel like it, as and when somebody asks us. To make it successful, you have to have that upfront commitment. You need to have a focus that this is really what you want to achieve, and it needs to start at the top. But it also needs for investment of time, people time, ideas, creativity, and often financial. So the process that one goes through when looking at starting a business is to engage with the board, look at the management team. You then create the concept, develop the strategy, implement it, so launch it, make it happen, and then run the business. I'm just going to run through with you each one of those 6 areas. So it starts at the top. You need to have clarity on what your founding document says. Does your founding document, the object within your founding document, allow you to fit a business within that? It's not the end of the world if it's not structured in that way. It just has tax implications for you. But often we find that the founding document object is broad enough to naturally lend itself to some form of business activity. And you just need to bear that in mind when you're coming up with ideas. It needs to be a board initiative. The board needs to be behind this. It needs to come from the top and be driven from the top. If there's one person who's leading on it and is really passionate about it, they can't move the entire organization on their own. There needs to be a mandate from the top. You also need to look at your management structure and see, is there somebody in this leadership team who is going to be the business manager, who's going to be the one reporting back to management meetings and board meetings, who's going to hold it and project manage this activity, be responsible for it, and be held accountable. And then you also need to look at your project team. Who are the people that you need? Is there somebody in the organization that can be co-opted into this team? Is it a cross-disciplinary team, or are there new appointments that need to be made? So the next one is to look at the business concept. Come up with an idea. Where do you start generating business ideas? So you can start with the environmental analysis. Looking around you. What is your physical location? What are the natural resources? This was illustrated in an exemplary way recently. My business colleague Bruce went to go and visit 3 organizations in northern Mpumalanga, and they're talking about business ideas, and literally outside the door is this enormous plot of land that is so rich and so fertile. Bruce likes to say you could throw a pip out the window and come back next week and you'd find a tree. So it was a prime example of a resource that's literally sitting outside the door that could be utilized for a food security project that sell vegetables, sell produce, and generate income. So what is it in terms of your physical environment? What about your community? What are the community needs? What are the, who is in your community? What is your economic status? What is the culture of the environment around you? What is the competition? Are you situated right next door to a mall where you've got shops of certain types that would not be good for you to start that kind of business because it would put you in competition? So really having a look around your environment to see what it is that is there, and then what are the opportunities and what is the what's already in place. Then looking at the problem and seeing, okay, what are the needs of the community? What are the things that actually need to be solved? Where are the problems? What are the issues, the things that people are wanting to engage with? Then finally, you look at the people. What are their demographics? So demographics are things like age, race, gender. Who are the people around you that you would want to work with? But you also need to look at the psychographics, which is what motivates them, what drives them, what are their hobbies, what are they interested in, where are you going to find them, how do you connect with people? Just a very quick little aside, I was once told of a businessman who would book a one-way ticket or return ticket between his home in New Zealand and Australia in first class, and he would sit in the first class lounge for hours meeting the businessmen who were his primary target market group. He would then fly to Australia. I don't even think he spent the night. I think he then just got on the return flight, spent a few hours in the first class lounge there, met a whole lot of new people, and then flew all the way back. And he would have that outlay of a flight as his marketing cost, because he knew where the people hung out, what they were interested in, where he could find the people that he works with. So what are the kind of psychographics that relate to your market? And then you can look at your opportunities around you. What are the threats? What are the considerations? One of the big threats being COVID. How is that impacting you as an organization? And then you brainstorm. Dump it all down. Get it all in. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Get as many people involved in brainstorming and getting different perspectives from all over the place. And then you have to assess the ideas. How plausible are your ideas? A process that we use is a form of storyboarding, where we take the business idea and you tell its story. Where does your raw materials come from? Do you manufacture? Who are the people you need involved? Where would you sell it? And you kind of just talk it through as a story to see what are the potential challenges that need to be overcome and what are the opportunities that you can maximize. So taking each business idea and running it through a story to see what works and what doesn't work. You also need to look at the income model. Will this thing actually make us money? There are often ideas that will make you a little bit, but is it enough? And so you need to really understand how the money is generated in this business idea. And then look at your engine room, your back end. What is required to make this thing work? What is it? The team structure, the accounting structure, the manufacturing structure, what is it that you need? Is it doable? Is it plausible? Is it something that will actually be possible? I think I probably should switch 4 and 5 because you do need to at least make a choice at some point. You need to decide this is what we are going to do, and then put all the other ideas that might also be brilliant aside so that you gain clarity. Because as I said early on, if you need focus and you need to be crystal clear on what it is you do, how you do it, and who you do it for. Because otherwise you're not going to be able to communicate well to those who would want to invest with you. And this is the same story you have as a nonprofit. Do you have absolute clarity on your projects? Are you able to communicate those effectively in any kind of funding proposal? And so any kind of business plan that you decide to write up needs to have that crystal clarity of exactly what it is that you have decided that you will do. The next step is then to build a business strategy. I know this diagram is a little bit small. This is our strategy model that we use with clients to really flesh out all of the aspects that you need to document and need to have clear in your head. So there are 12 here. I'll just run through them very quickly so you can, because I know you can't read them on the screen as well. The first is purpose. Do you know exactly what it is why you are doing this business? Your customer, number 2. 3 is your unique product offering, what it is that you offer. The benefits, number 4. The channels of communication and marketing. 6, your customer relationship management. How are you going to engage those? 7 is your processes. 8 is resources. 9 is partners. Can't do this alone. 10 is expenses. 11 is revenue. And then number 12 is registration. And it's a misnomer that you have to have a separate legal entity for a business. You can actually run the business as a division, department, project, whatever you want to call it, within the nonprofit organization. However, there might be strategic reasons that you wish to actually separate this into a different legal entity. And that is the conversation we would have at number 12. So you look then at your business strategy and you say, are our concepts feasible? Is this business concept actually a workable thing that we can actually do? Are the plans viable? Do they make sense? Is this something that is, we can actually implement this? Big one, is your team capable? Who's going to do it? Do we need extra input in the team? Do we need to employ people? Like Walanani employed somebody with a marketing background and it changed it completely. They got the right person involved. Are your goals achievable? And I speak a little bit later on about optimism and we want to conquer the world. But is this actually doable? And finally, is the business model sustainable? Is this something that you can actually take with you into the long term? So those are the things that you need to consider when you are looking at your strategy. To look at the 12 business areas and then to weigh them up, measure them up, hold them up against these 5 questions to see, does it actually work for you as an organization? Once you're happy with your plan and your strategy, then you need to look at actually implementing. And there are a number of challenges we have with mindset when it comes to implementation. The first one is we're always overly optimistic. We're the only one to ever think of this solution to the problem. This will solve all our problems, all our clients' problems. We're going to conquer the world. It will be quick and it will be easy. It's never easy. You're going to hit bumps in the road. It's never going to be a smooth sailing. And you might have this beautifully articulated strategy document and you can say, right, step 1, step 2, step 3, but then something like a global pandemic will throw you a spanner in the works. There's always something that will challenge you, that will make it necessary to reassess and re-engage. And it will be quick. People have an expectation that if I start this business thing, within 2-3 months, I'm going to have customers lining up, I'm going to have money rolling in, I'm going to be sustainable, it's going to be marvelous. And it's not. It takes time, it takes energy, and you have to be committed for the long run. So I think a lot of nonprofits say, well, we'll give it a year. We'll set aside money, we'll set aside a team thing, we'll see how it goes. And 1/4 of a person's responsibility is to run the business. And so they obviously then deprioritize it because they're busy with the other 75% of their job, which is what they signed up for as working for a nonprofit and dealing with their projects. You haven't achieved with 1/4 of a post in 12 months what you would have done with 100% of a post over that time. So of course, the results are not going to be there the same way that you expect, especially if your expectation is overly optimistic. And so we put it in the bin, we say thank you, that was a great a great idea, didn't really work for us, not going to try that again, we'll focus on what we're good at. Instead of saying, let's actually commit to this and really make a go of it. And so that then brings me to the running of the business, the mindset that you need to actually run this business. And the first one is belief. And it is to wholly believe that the product or service that you offer is exactly what the market, the person needs. And that the person is prepared to pay for it. So I don't think we have too much of a problem when it comes to belief around what we offer. As nonprofit organizations, we even articulate that in a theory of change. If you do this, then we will see this change. We know this is what is the best thing for our beneficiaries. This is the best thing for the market. We've established that through this process of strategy development that this is really what people need. But we don't always recognize that it's something that they are prepared to pay for. So with beneficiaries, we give. But with the market, we need to be able to attract the market. Do you have something of value to them that they want, they're actually coming to you for? Do you believe that this is something that they should come to you for? And then it's transactional. So we give to our beneficiaries for no reward, but with a business, there needs to be a quid pro quo. There needs to be a money in hand. And the number of times people have discounted things and gone, oh, I just did it for them. We didn't think to charge them. We didn't think to talk about it up front to tell them how much it cost. We kind of didn't know how much to charge, so we charged a whole lot less than the real cost. I mean, who runs a business like that? Just because some of your costs might be subsidized by the donor income into your NPO doesn't mean that what you offer isn't worth what you're asking for it. And to discount that and to change your mind and to not be hold to the value that you should receive something for the service or product. Running a business is not self-sacrificing. Thirdly, there's an investment in time, in money. Most entrepreneurs invest their savings, their assets, their lives to make it work. You have to have skin in the game or it won't be a priority. You really have to put your money where your mouth is to be able to make this business something that you invested in. Fourthly, there's a psychology to sales. You need to understand people, and NPOs are really good at that. They really understand people and what motivates them and so forth. But you need to understand your market, what it motivates them, how to reach that audience. And I've given some examples as we've spoken. Why do people buy for the first time? What makes them repeat buy? How do you get them to buy more? Need to understand that sales is actually a lesson in psychology. it's not a lesson in being a pushy salesperson and just, you know, push till they say yes to get you to go away. There is a psychology involved, and that is a mindset shift. And then finally, running a business needs to be based on values, your values. Your decision making needs to be value-based. We had this discussion in one of our Monday morning NPO cloud groups. There are lots of decisions that need to be made every day in running a business. And unless you have a foundational parameters, core priorities, guiding compass to help you to make those decisions, you can be, you know, shifted from one side to the other. There's no consistency in your decision-making process. So really running a business is all about standing by your values, knowing what they are. So just in summary, those are the 6 steps to go through to run a business, to get one up and started, just particularly in terms of mindset. Throughout the presentation, we've had some grey scenes, we've had some rain, we've had some miserable things, but hopefully now you are able to see the light, to see where you're going to see what the options are, and yeah, so that there is a way forward for you. But do you need help? I know that this is a challenging journey. It's not a journey that one takes lightly, and it is often a journey that can be best done with a helping hand. So contracting consultants like us can save you time by leveraging their experience and save you money by avoiding costly mistakes. Working with a consultant ensures accountability to the process, so that you stay on track, and a sounding board to think through ideas and decisions. EM Solutions also offers a community of like-minded people to engage with and support you on this journey, because we need friends. We need to do this together. So to this end, we as EM Solutions are offering everyone at this event a free 45-minute consultation to discuss your journey with you. So if you send us an email at the Contact Us page of our website, I'll show you in a minute, and attach your Quicket ticket, we can set up a time to discuss a specific issue that you may be concerned about. We would really love to hear from as many of you as possible to be able to have a chat with you and see where you are on this journey and how we can assist you. So we are not just Bruce and I, we are a community, and we strongly believe in community. So these are the different ways that you can engage with us and connect with us. So my LinkedIn, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're wanting to connect with us on the free consultation, the website address is there, and Caroline has put the links into the chat, so you can click on them or copy them down. We also have a monthly webinar, and we send that webinar invite out to our mailing list. So if you're interested in joining our webinar, also just send us an email from the contact email on the website and just say, add me to the mailing list, and we'll add you to the mailing list. Then we have started what we call the NPO Cloud Business Strategies group. And there are 2 ways that you can be involved in the NPO Cloud. And this is really for organizations who either have a business or wanting to start a business, wanting to engage in some way. The one is to request membership to our Facebook group. So clicking through to the link, and it'll come up as a request, and we post on there regularly useful information, and we share with people. And we also post adverts for our events and things that are coming up. And then every Monday, without fail, unless it's a public holiday, we meet at 12 o'clock and we discuss topics that are relevant to the nonprofit sector, to running a business, to mindsets, to whatever is necessary. It's not a workshop, it's not a training session, it's not a teaching opportunity. It's for us as a group of people who are in the same boat to discuss, and we learn as much from you as you learn from us. So it really is just a really good opportunity to connect with people in the same boat as you. And so that meeting ID is the same for every week, and you are more than welcome to join us every single Monday.